Hi there, welcome to iTWireTV. Today I'm delighted to be speaking with Felipe Flores, the founder of Data Futurology. Thank you so much for your time, Felipe.
Mate, thank you so much for having me on. It's great to be on your show. Thanks a lot.
Excellent, no, thank you. So I guess let's start. Can you tell us about Data Futurology? What is Data Futurology and, what does your organization do? And I guess what do you do on a daily basis?
Yeah, great. Thanks, mate. So Data Futurology, it started as a podcast and then sort of grew from there. But the need behind it was around helping data practitioners become data leaders and executives in the space. So what initially what I saw in the market is that there was so much good content on how to become a good data practitioner. You can do courses and become a data scientist, a data analyst, a data engineer, and you could progress through your knowledge in those areas and become very specialized and very technical throughout that. And even in a working career was the same. But that trajectory didn't prepare us as data practitioners, didn't prepare us to become data leaders, and didn't prepare us to become executives, where the day-to-day looks completely different, where you're going to have 12 meetings a day, you're going to have a wide portfolio of projects that you're looking after. You need to do a lot of communications and stakeholder management and provide kind of like a bit of marketing of what the analytics team is doing. They're all sort of skills that we don't practice as data practitioners when we're coming up and growing up professionally. So I saw that there was kind of like this gap of where do analytics practitioners look to help them become leaders, and then once they're leaders, where do they get the industry trends? Where do they get ideas on how to get more value from their data, from their AI, to create bigger change in their organization? And that's the kind of like the essence of what we wanted to capture in Data Futurology, to help to create a place to have these conversations where the community gets together to say, how do we get more value from this wonderful technology being AI? How do we create bigger change in the organization? How do we do change management, which is a big piece of something that you have to do in introducing, say, a new machine learning model into an organization? And then from there, so the podcast grew into then video series, to then public events. So we run conferences now, and private events where we do executive lunches, for example, to discuss particular issues and pain points. And as part of that, we're running like Australia's largest AI conferences. We had one in Melbourne earlier in the year. We have one in Sydney coming up at the end of August, where it's a 2-day event. Where we have a data engineering day, and then an advancing AI day. Advancing AI day is day 2, and on August 30th and 31st. And yeah, kind of like couldn't be any prouder. And then the last thing I'll say about this is that Data Futurology has an amazing team, and they do everything. And I always make sure that I emphasize that I do embarrassingly little to help with all this amazing stuff. And yeah, they literally are magicians and take care of everything. And yeah, so it's been a pleasure for this to happen over the last 4 years. So Data Futurology, I started it in 2018. We're about just over 4 years in now, and I'm enjoying the journey. And the key is to help people in the community by linking the community together around these topics. So becoming a leader in the space, staying ahead of industry trends, and getting more value from AI.
Yeah, fantastic. Can I ask, I guess, hopefully this question comes across the way I want it to, is every data, great data expert a good data leader? I guess what are the traits that will make a good data leader? I guess we're asked that question, and you hear a story sometimes about you got the best mechanic in the workshop. Say the company says you're the best mechanic, we want you to run the team, and suddenly that guy's now doing budgets and discipline, and they think, I wish I was just back on the tools. I guess is there a skill set to be a leader, and what type of people are best at it? And conversely, what people might be happier not being a leader?
Yeah, mate, I love the question. I love the question. And you're spot on. Essentially, like, leadership is not for everyone, and that's totally fine. and the point there is that to continue to be a practitioner on the data space from a technical perspective, there's lots of content there. So it was a gap that was already filled essentially. And I think that's a really worthwhile pursuit. And I think and I've also seen people who were on the tools, who then became leaders and or executives, and then went back to the tools. And that's really good, a really good journey. So I think it's important to be both self-aware about an individual's strengths and weaknesses, but also understanding what you really want. And for people that do want to become a data leader, or even people if they're curious and interested of like, what does it take, or what is the data leaders think about, or what do they do all day, right? Like that's where Data Futurology provides some resources around that in terms of the content. And additionally, the other cohort of people that started to be part of our audience is stakeholders of analytics teams. So this is like heads of marketing or heads of customer experience, people in finance, etc., that want to understand how to interface with the analytics and data science team, want to learn a little bit more to get more value from this wonderful technology. And that's been great as well, to be able to close that gap, be that bridge, etc., and give people almost like a bit of a look-in. So for business people, it's kind of like a bit of a look-in into the technical side, because we are focused around AI and the data space. And for really technical people, it's kind of like a look-in on being a leader and being a bit more of a business person. And yeah, it was all around creating the space for people to have that option, I guess, to follow their curiosity. But I totally agree with you that it's not necessarily that's something for everyone, and that is totally fine, that people need to follow their heart.
Yeah, wonderful. What about, can you tell us the Felipe story? I guess, how did you, I mean, it's exciting that you saw that gap, but I guess, how did you yourself get, I guess, what is your story of data science? How did you get into the field?
Yeah, thanks, mate. Good question. So I'm just thinking where to start. So I'll mention very, very briefly that I came to Australia when I was 19 years old. I came as a backpacker, and I was going to stay in Australia for 5 weeks. And when I came, I didn't speak a word of English. And I got here and I loved it. And I decided to stay. And I was like, all right, I'm going to have to figure it out. And I tried getting a job, as you can imagine, not speaking the language, a huge hurdle. But I did end up getting a job, which was as a door knocker. So I was literally selling Optus home phone and internet on the streets of Brisbane, knocking on 120 doors a day.
Wow.
I couldn't speak the language, so they gave me a script, and I would knock on the door, and they would open the door, and I'd bring up my piece of paper and be like, start to read and be like, hello, how are you today? Like the worst accent you can imagine. And people were really nice. Nobody bought anything. Like, it wasn't sales zero, but people were really nice. Like, they invited me into their house. We had morning tea. They invited me for lunch. They invited me to barbecues. I was and they were literally teaching me English through this. And I was couch surfing at colleagues and friends' places. And anyway, that's how I got by. And then I wanted to get into IT, and I started looking for, once I could speak a little bit, I started looking for jobs in that space, and I got a job in a small company in Brisbane, and I was going to do some web development for them. And then the first day I heard people cursing because the database went down 4 or 5 times. Yep. And I was like, oh, a database, you say? Went to the library, started looking at books, and then ended up finding a book on Access, like Microsoft Access. And this was a company of, I don't know, 15 people. And then I was trying to understand more about their problems in the business, kind of like reading this book. And then I went to, this is, I don't know, 6 or 8 weeks later, I went to the founder and I said, I can fix your database problem. And he was like, what do you mean? You're just a kid. He's like, I paid all this money to a professional software house to build us this custom database, and it's useless. What do you reckon? What you think you can do? You can do better? And I was like, oh, give me 6 weeks. And he's like, fine, I'll take a gamble. Anyway, and I went simple. I built something on Access. It was a database, and I did the reports and then a bit of analytics to identify how to optimize sales, who was doing the best in what areas, with what demographics, with what type of businesses, etc. And then sort of earned my keep. And then that company later on sponsored me, and then I could go later on. Did some other work in the data space, so kind of like fell into the data space from that perspective. But then managed to go into uni, and then when I was doing my thesis at uni, I got a place in a research project where the task that I got given was to create an algorithm that took in brainwave activity, so EEG, and translated that to a number from 1 to 5, where number 1, and this is to detect tiredness in truck drivers in the mines.
Yes.
So number 1, at stage 1, you were freshly awake. At number 5, you were asleep. And then in between, it was how tired you were. And when somebody went from number 3 to number 4, you had to stop the truck, pull over. You were too tired and had to essentially get removed and get changed for somebody else. And that's because the trucks that these people drive, they're $500 million trucks. They carry, 300 tons. And they can do a lot of damage to themselves, to other people, to other equipment, and to the mine itself. So the shape of the mine really helps the productivity, and they engineer that very delicately. So identifying when people were too tired to drive was a key risk, and something that we were able to do as a research project back then. So I designed the onboard computer of the first version, and the algorithm. So there was a machine learning algorithm running on the onboard computer, and it would send the data back to a server where we had a bigger machine learning model, which in that case was a neural network running on a server to identify and verify the numbers that we're creating or outputting. And that research project, then became a commercial product, which then became a company. And not that I did sort of anything on the commercial side myself, but I was just kind of like an engineer at that stage. And it was amazing to see like this thing that 3 guys were kind of working on that then became a company. And the company's still going today. And they recently, I think last year or the year before, they raised some money to expand from mining into long-haul truck driving and medicine, particularly to identify tired doctors. And as you can imagine, the technology has evolved over 20 years, where now, before when I was involved, it used to sit in a baseball cap with the onboard computer was in the lining of the cap and the sensors to the front. Now it's just a headband with everything sitting just at the front of your forehead. But that research project is really what got me into machine learning and data science in terms of trying to solve this problem of translating brainwave activity to this number of between 1 to 5 and identify the changes. And through that research project, we got like thousands of hours of footage from sleep experts around the world that was labeled. So then we could start to build the machine learning model, and the interest sort of sparked from there.
That's an incredible story, and all that because one guy cursed the database one day led you on this. So I guess the lesson there is we shouldn't feel bad if we curse our database. We might inspire some guy to do all these incredible things. That's amazing, the stuff you've done. And you said you came over when you were 19. Felipe, you don't look a day over 21. So that's been a pretty intense 2 years.
That is too kind, mate. I reckon, so I've been in Australia 20 years. So I came here in 2002. Yep. I arrived in December 2002. So Mags, it's been amazing. Like I love it. I love it here.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. And I wouldn't have guessed that you didn't speak English when you came, because you got the mate down pat. You're a true Australian.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Yeah, what can I say? I don't know. I married an Aussie, so that helps.
Excellent. Very good. Wow. No, that's a great story. And I guess, looking to the future, I suppose, do you ever think, I mean, we see great tools coming out like SageMaker, things like that. I guess, do you ever think we'll be in a position where the tools are so advanced that companies can have data science in a box or data science as a service? Can we, I guess, I guess is the role of a data science, can it be wrapped up into a service for smaller companies that, or companies that may not have the scale to be able to have a great data team on staff?
Oh, mate, great question. Great question. So short answer is, from my view, and I know that this kind of is a bit divisive in the data science community, as in people's answer to this question. My personal answer is yes. I think we can get there. I think it'll take a long time. So, for example, a few years ago now, I want to say in 2016, Google released a paper around what it takes to create and productionize a machine learning model, and they had an overview of the requirements, and they put it into groupings. And the idea was to try to quantify the amount of time and effort required in these different groupings, kind of like of this, almost like a pipeline. And what came out of that, one of the key findings was that at that stage, the machine learning code and creation component was about 5% of the end-to-end process. And in the other end-to-end, and the other 95%, there was things like data preparation and data engineering, security, model, serving the model, being able to deploy, identify when the model is getting data that it didn't receive during training, so they might be making some predictions that are erroneous. So there's so much that is required in order to support the machine learning model, that it's almost like in a soccer analogy. I guess I'm South American, so I guess soccer is our game. But the machine learning model is the striker, but you need a whole team to support the striker. Otherwise, they have nothing to strike. So I think that. And I should say, since then, a lot of focus, and from before then, a lot of focus and hype has been around that machine learning code and on optimizing how to create that. And people have studied that, and researchers and companies and the open source community have continually improved the tools to do that 5%. And it's been in that 5% being the machine learning creation and training. And it's been in the last recent years, where we're paying more and more attention to the other 95%. And I think that in terms of automation, there's progress required on both sides to be able to get to the vision that you described in terms of data science in a box. The baby version that we have today are things like automated machine learning tools, sometimes called AutoML, where you can provide a data set, and the AutoML tools tries hundreds of algorithms against that data set to see what algorithm gives us the best prediction. And that's because now compute is cheap. You can do that on the cloud. It's very fast, and you get excellent outputs. Sorry. So you have a version of being able to create the machine learning model in a lot of cases automatically or mostly automatically, mostly automated. But then you need a little that other 95% of the work of data collection, data curation, having good data quality, and then you create a machine learning model, and on the other side, it's around deploying and monitoring and seeing how it's being used and making sure that that use aligns with the training data that the algorithm was created against. And then on top of that, you need to think about the problem, the business problem that you're trying to solve, and making sure that it's the right one to make an impact in the business, and that then the data that you have aligns to and is able to help support the solving of that problem. And then wrapping it all together is a layer of layer of governance and management, where there's been a lot of machine learning models and AI in production that they've gotten sort of in trouble because they are sometimes racist models, sometimes sexist models, and they've made decisions that can be seen as not the type of world that we want to perpetuate. And then what happens in those, or what happens in those cases is that the algorithm became racist or sexist because it was fed information that had that bias in the data. So then the algorithm just learned it from the data, and now it's making decisions that are perpetuating what we don't want it to perpetuate. But the interesting thing is that that data had that bias because the world has that bias, or had that bias at that stage, and then it was capturing the data, which went into the algorithms, etc. So there's an important aspect of governance and management to have ethical and responsible AI, where it's forcing us to have some tough conversations about the type of world that we want to have in the future, and use AI as a tool to help us get there. But it means there's a lot of discussion about what we want that world to look like.
Yes, no, that's very insightful. Yeah, Felipe, that's really interesting. And talking about the future of the world, I guess, what about the future of data science and analytics? We talk about, I remember, 20 years ago, talking about the great things that AI could do, and people thought computers were going to be sentient, and that never happened. And now we see, with the advent of cloud computing, it seems AI has come back into news, able to really deliver on the things people thought AI could do decades ago. And machine learning appears to be the great thing at the moment. But what about, I guess, what do you think might be the next wave? What do you think we can see in the future of data science and analytics, with the great power we've got and built on the awesome things people are doing with machine learning and data science?
Mate. Yeah, great question. Such a good question. So yeah, you're absolutely right that there's been a few waves of improvements that have brought into greater fruition the benefits that AI can bring, because some of the AI algorithms were created in the 50s, in the 60s, in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s. And at the time, there was a lot of hype around what AI could do, and there wasn't much being delivered. And what happened was that the computing power wasn't at the level required to really bring the algorithms to life. The data sets were quite small at that stage, because most of the world wasn't digitized. A lot of it was in analog. So there was small data sets, and the storage of the data was really expensive at the time. So as those three things became cheaper and more widely available, it meant that there was more data, more compute power, cheaper storage, people were storing more data, and then we had sort of the digital transformation with the internet, and then suddenly a lot more of our information of our day-to-day life is in this digital format, and then cloud allows us to borrow somebody else's computers to run our processing, and then with that, we got to see amazing advancements in AI across the board. So in healthcare, being able to diagnose people based on, say, imaging, or even like advancements in genomics. We're looking at utility and predicting electricity demand much better than ever before, in banking and telco, etc. There's all this sort of surge of benefits that are now being able to be realized from AI. And linking to what I was saying before, that a lot of that has been through really hard work of many great women and men in not only on the research side, but on the companies, on the implementation and application of that. And so the link to what I was saying before is this: when you zoom out at the efforts required, it's only about 5% that goes, when you look at the end-to-end process, about 5% of the effort goes into the machine learning code and creation itself, the creation of the machine learning model. And then you need all this other sort of supporting infrastructure around it, which is also getting better and better. So then we're able now to create models easier than ever before. So now we have the compute is commoditized, the storage is commoditized. We're able to store more data than ever. And now the machine learning models can be created largely automated. So it's kind of like, what's next? Or almost like, what's left? And what's left is the data. So the data that we have within our organizations, that is that organization's unique value selling proposition, or maybe a differentiator. That the data that a company has about their customers is data that nobody else has.
Mm.
So in a world where, you know, you can spin up a cloud cluster and you can run machine learning models and they can give you the best prediction possible in an automated way, and you're having improvements in kind of like the other 95% of the value chain, there's more and more of the focus is, or of the future value is on the unique data that you have and how you treat it. And by that, I mean to what quality you can get it. Because as an organization, you're capturing this data in your day-to-day, in the way that you work with your customers, in the way that you provide your service or your value back to them. You're capturing data, and then how well are you capturing this data? And then is one part. So you want to have the highest quality data that you want, that you can. Then you want to have data that is largely, or as much as possible, unique to your organization, and then you want to put it to the best possible use by being creative with the type of solutions or business problems that you go to solve. And then the rest is kind of like becoming more and more automated. So along that vein, and to help data science and AI practitioners to start to think more about the data and focus more on the data, there's now a movement that is starting within the AI community, something that I'm very interested about, which is called data-centric AI.
Okay.
And it's focusing on how do you get the best quality data? How do you build algorithms for small data sets, which a lot of organizations have small data sets. You're looking at how you can improve your data quality. You want to leverage this AutoML, and obviously you want to have responsible and ethical AI, as we were speaking of before. And there's such a broad space within AI that I think the personal view is that the next few years are going to see increased growth in that space, more, and ideally more and more research and community development built into this, so more companies can take advantage of this wonderful technology, can get better data and make better use of that. And as a result, we all benefit. Everyone benefits when, you know, healthcare companies are developing better AI, or telcos or banks or retail. Like at the end, the customer benefits, so we benefit and our lives get better. So I think that's one of the things that I think there'll be a big focus on in the next few years within AI.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's awesome. I appreciate that. And Felipe, you mentioned at the beginning, Data Futurology is running an event in Sydney on August 30 and 31st. What is that event called? And I guess and how do people find more information and register?
Great, thank you so much. On the Data Futurology website, go to datafuturology.com /events, or if you go to the homepage, there'll be an events tab at the top, and there has all of our events listed. The next one is actually on the 26th of July, which is a webinar around accelerating MLOps with SageMaker. So the idea of MLOps is to be able to operationalize machine learning models. So once you create them, you want to deliver them to the customer as quickly and as best as possible. And then you want to track how it's performing over time. So that's kind of MLOps. And we're doing a webinar covering that in SageMaker on July 26th. So check out the website there. And then August 30th and 31st, we have a 2-day conference essentially in Sydney. So we have the Advancing AI part, which is the AI conference on August 30th, and we have the Data Engineering Summit on August 31st. Data engineering is the term, the specialization that has come in to help us with a lot of that 95% of the pipeline that I was saying, that a lot of the work that's not ML, but it's data related, a lot of that work is done by data engineers. So they're crucially important to the space. And we have that day on August 31st dedicated to data engineering practices. So August 31st in Sydney, so it'll be 2-day conference in Sydney. And then towards the end of the year, at the end of October, 25th of October, we have our conference on MLOps in Melbourne. So that's called Successfully Scaling AI with MLOps. That'll be a 1-day event in Melbourne, 25th of October. So really excited to be creating these conferences in Australia. The practitioners that we get to come and speak are phenomenal, and the community that gets together and the discussions are excellent. Obviously, I'm biased, but I think that they're really great.
Oh, well, you've created the sort of thing you would want to go to, and that's awesome. Your story was awesome. The things that you're working on, the reason why Data Futurology came about, the gap you wanted to fill and the service you wanted to provide to data practitioners, that's wonderful. It's been a wonderful story. I've really enjoyed hearing that, and your thoughts on, what we can be doing better as professionals, but also where the future of the industry is. So no, it's been wonderful. Thank you so much, Felipe.
Right, too kind. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thank you so much for the chat. And yeah, love spending some time with you today. So thanks again, mate. Really appreciate it.
No, thank you. That's been Felipe Flores, founder of Data Futurology.